Hello, welcome to the Commercial Real Estate Talk channel. This is podcast episode 137. I'm your host, George Morales. Thanks for tuning in to this look at commercial real estate. I'm used to saying weekly look, but we haven't been doing the podcast necessarily weekly. And if you listen to us on audio, one of the purposes of doing this podcast episode is really just to let you know that we have been off the podcast air, the audio airs for some time now, maybe 3 or 4 months or 5 months, but we have not been silent when it comes to commercial real estate. We've been doing videos and shorts through our Commercial Real Estate Talk channel on YouTube. So here it is. If you're, go please to the Commercial Real Estate Talk channel, and it's at CRE Help, at CRE Help is how you can connect with us on YouTube. And we've been almost weekly or bi-weekly pushing out a short video on commercial real estate, 60 seconds or less, talking about commercial real estate and all relevant subjects that will help you negotiate better leases and help your business out when it comes to commercial real estate. We've also been doing some longer form podcasts as well, planning some teaching series. So really gonna wanna connect with us on YouTube. We'll try to push some of these also through audio. Sometimes time gets away and we're not able to do that. But this is episode 137 officially of the Commercial Real Estate Talk podcast. So again, one of the purposes is so that you can connect with us through YouTube and our other forums, LinkedIn and so forth. Now, the title is DOGE terminates GSA leases. That's what we want to talk about and what's going to be the long-term impact. We'll try to do this as quickly as possible. This article here is wonderful by TREP. First one that we'll take a look at, DOGE looks to cut GSA lease office space, quantifying the impact. Now, according to TREP, and I've seen numbers much higher, the federal government leases more than 2,500 square feet of properties and $1.877 billion in revenue that they can terminate in the next 4 years under the Trump administration. That's 35% of all GSA leases that they could terminate, 35%. I wish it could be more. And frankly, as we go through this podcast, I'll raise a question: why wasn't the Biden administration or the Trump administration before them or the Obama administration, any administration, terminating some of these spaces, but more particularly the last 4 years since the pandemic? There's other articles that we've discussed on our podcast whereby the federal government has been leasing and paying for spaces that they're not occupying. At one point, it was staggering. Only like 28-30% of all federal leases were actually occupied because people were still working remotely. Well, Trump is starting some mass layoffs of folks who are working remotely, requiring them to come back to the office. And now they're starting the second phase, which is terminating some of these leases. Now, according to the TREP, federal government leases about 149 million square feet, 149.49. It pays $5.525 in annual rent, average rate of $35 a square foot, and there's a large portion of those that can be terminated. And here it is. This is a great article. Again, I've posted this through my LinkedIn channel, so connect with us at Blue Box Real Estate, or my own. Just hit me a note and we can connect. Love to meet you also and talk commercial real estate. And here you have it: the number of leases, square footage leased, and what can be terminated, and the savings. So year by year. Now, as we go through this, you'll see market by market. Washington, D.C., no surprise, is the largest landlord of GSA leases. Almost 10% of the market is leased to GSA leases. But a surprise is Kansas City at number 4, almost 6% of the Kansas City market. What's happening in Kansas City? They have 6% of the market. Denver, obviously New York is number 2 in terms of square footage leased, but not per percentage. That's only, even though they have almost 5 million square feet of GSA leases, that's only accounts for about 0.73%. Now, there was another interesting article here on Newsweek, and I want to show you. Newsweek shows a few of the leases here. Again, hey, Mr. Trump, everybody is talking about it, including Newsweek. Okay, Trump cuts leases on 2.3 million square feet of federal properties, the full list. Okay, this is from February 19th. This is pretty fresh. Mass layoffs, federal employees, government waste. There's Mr. Trump. And here's a list, an itemized list of those leases. This is wonderful for us to just dig into. If you see Miami, Florida, we've gone through pretty unscathed. Only 3,000 square feet has been terminated, 3,076, saving $7,383. What was that, a warehouse? That's the Department of State. But look at Atlanta, Georgia, 119,000 square feet. You just got new supply in that Atlanta market, suburban market. There's Kansas City, 51,000 square feet. And obviously Arlington, Virginia, 55,000, 49,000. Look at the savings, 12.9 million, 12.2 million. This is great. Oh my, look at the Department of Labor has given up 845,000 square feet of office space for about 7.1 million in savings. Now this is the one that caught my attention, and I posted this recently on my LinkedIn account. Springfield, Illinois, GSA had a 386 square foot office, saved $164,000. A 386 square foot office, that's like a co-working space. Saved $164,000, that's over $400 a square foot. How about New York? Somebody lost their co-working space, 250 square feet. And there's 5 pages of this. But look at Department of Homeland Security. We canceled the lease that had 0 square footage, and we saved 1.3 million square feet. I mean, that seemed like a no-brainer. What were we doing? Here's another one. 0 square footage saved 2.2 million square feet. So I don't know what Department of Homeland Security had. Maybe I don't know what happened. I can't explain how you have 0 square footage and yet you were paying $2.2 million in rent. So let's keep going. Here we have a great article. Trump administration moves to cut 100 federal leases, nearly 100 federal leases. This is from CoStar, as real estate shakeups grow. Now, this is an interesting article because it's going to highlight, and I did a LinkedIn post whereby I talked about 5 different things to consider as the federal government cancels leases, reduction in office space, creating more supply, market adjustments, shift to smaller, more efficient spaces, impact on economies, and opportunities for the private sector. And so please, again, another reason to follow us. But this is where the rubber meets the road, okay? Here it talks about that 845,000 square foot lease that was just terminated in Washington, D.C. But who owns these office spaces? And maybe this is one reason, I speculate, why leases haven't been terminated sooner. I mean, if you weren't aware, since COVID, folks have been working from home in the federal government. Spaces have been vacant, and we keep stroking checks, taxpayers, to people like Office Properties Income Trust, whose largest tenant is the federal government. And they're starting to warn their investors that, hey, there may be some headwinds ahead. And so let's keep going. Office Property Trust said the 110,000 square feet, about 856,000 in revenue, is one of their exposures that had been terminated. Now look at Easterly Government Properties. Another one said that one of their properties is listed among the 98 that have been canceled. The REIT lost the National Labor Relations Board at 130 South Elmwood Avenue in Buffalo, New York. And so, yeah, they're standing aligned with DOGE's efforts and are ready to leverage our expertise to help streamline operations. Hey, that's a good approach. It's coming anyway. Let's look at more cost cut savings. Who else is exposed here? Now, listen to this. This one is kind of, to me, something worth discussing in its own podcast. When we analyze, this is from Alan Todd, Managing Director and Head of CMBS Strategies for Bank of America. Okay, so these REITs are buying buildings, they're getting loans from places like Bank of America. When we analyze which leased office space might be exposed to cost cuttings, we looked at how reported rents being paid by the federal government compared to local and regional peer sets. In other words, what does the federal government pay per square foot for space compared to the private sector? All right, not good. We found that across 20 large U.S. metro areas, the government appears to be paying rates per square foot in the roughly 50% higher on average than is required for office buildings in the surrounding market. We doubt that the higher rental rates are indicative of property quality, which suggests these assets could potentially draw attention from cost cutters. In other words, private sector is leasing space on Main and Main on your market for $30 a square foot. The federal government shows up and they'll pay $45 a square foot for that same space. Why is that? Well, if you've been in commercial real estate as long as I've been, or even for 5 minutes, and you've done any transactions with GSA, I would chalk it up to one primary thing. willful incompetence, willful negligence. A regular typical tenant that hires a commercial real estate advisory firm like my firm, Blue Box Real Estate, to represent your needs. Let's say you need 10,000 square feet. We'll show up, we'll show them the market, we'll do the market data, we'll do surveys. We also know what's being negotiated on signed leases for tenant improvements and free rent and other incentives like options to renew and rights of first offer and so forth. And we'll come in and we'll represent our client. Typically, we save 15 to 20 to 25% off market rents, as if the tenant just showed up without the help of a commercial real estate advisor. Very impactful. If you take anything away from this, if you're a business owner, reach us at blueboxre.com, and my contact is there. And we're happy to talk to you about the market. We'll look at what you're paying, and are you overpaying like the federal government? And we'll come up with a strategy for your real estate so that you can win. It'll be innovative. We've got cash flow modeling. We've got all kinds of tools at our disposal and data that we can help you negotiate the best lease. We get compensated primarily by the landlords when these transactions are signed. If you don't use a commercial real estate advisor, your landlord's broker makes the money and saves, and they win. So please consider that. There's a little plug for how we make a living at blueboxre.com. But the federal government, not so much. Even though sometimes they have these national firms represent them, they'll come in and say, what are you asking for that office? $30 a square foot. Wonderful, we'll take it. We like that 10,000 feet, but we need modifications, Mr. Landlord, to the tune of about another $50, $60 a square foot. The landlord says, okay, well, here's what we'll do. We'll include the $50 a square foot and amortize that into your rent. So just on a straight line basis, to make it simple, 10-year deal, $50 a square foot divided by 10, $5 per square foot. So let's negotiate a $35 a square foot rate, because now that'll include the improvements. Wonderful, wonderful, but we'll need another 6 months to build that space out. Okay, well, that's 6 months of rent is $15 a square foot. Let's amortize that into your deal too. That's another $1.50 per year. So let's do a deal at $36.50. And you know what? We're going to charge you 5% annual increase. Is that okay, federal government? Oh yeah, that's wonderful. Take 6. How about 6, because inflation is going up this year? Great. So now you do a deal at $36.50, which includes the build out amortized and the free rent amortized to build the space out, and a above average rate per square foot. And that's what happens when you do a deal with GSA. What happens when Blue Box represents your interest for that same 10,000 square feet? What are you asking for? $30 a square foot. Excellent. Here's a $25 a square foot counter. We negotiate a rate somewhere in between, let's say $27 a square foot. In that $27 a square foot, we also know what market TIs are. And so we demand from the landlord, okay, listen, we need that 10,000 square feet, but we need $50 a square foot to build it out. We will sign a 10-year deal. Excellent. We design the space, we get that negotiated, and the landlord pays for the build out. And so that's what's happening in the private sector, but that's not what's happening in GSA. And that's one of the reasons this accounts for the federal government paying 50% more in rent. So that's just a quick little story of the actual boots on the ground experience of negotiating GSA, and why all of a sudden you can find out that they're paying 50% higher average rent for their space than the private sector. Private sector hiring tenant advisors, negotiating better deals, federal government handling on their own, not knowing what they're doing. That has to be so frustrating for a president who comes from the commercial real estate sector. All right, there's a neat tool that if you go to my channel, I show you how to use, but this is what I've done. I've been able to isolate and zoom into Miami, and I can see all these red dots are federal government leases. I can even click on one and it gives me the address. This is a valuable tool. If you're a property owner or if you're a tenant in that market, there might be opportunities if these leases get canceled for you to take advantage of buying real estate on the low, and or staying ahead of the curve if you're a landlord and talking to our firm. Maybe we can find off-market deals for you and pick up some of these buildings, knowing that there's a risk because you have federal government leases, but maybe you get a highly discounted space because of it. All right, DOGE here. 100 federal leases have been canceled. This is as of recent. And there's a picture of Mr. Trump and his son who stole the show in the little interview there in the government. So just a very narrow focused podcast on DOGE, GSA leases being terminated, And a couple of comments that we did here on LinkedIn. What I want to focus on is the first one is, if you're in a market like Washington or Kansas City or some parts of Miami even that has a little bit higher concentration of federal leases, stay tuned. If you're a property owner, batten down the hatches, start talking to firms like mine, figure out strategies of how to reposition your building and bring it back to the private sector, and or bring that building to market, the off market. Maybe someone values that land for industrial more, which is happening in Doral, and or residential. Okay, if you're a tenant, keep abreast of what's happening. There could be more opportunities. I suggest or predict it'll be a tenant's market for the next several years as these government leases produce more supply in the market, coupled with big tech and a lot of firms still canceling leases and downsizing as an impact of the COVID pandemic. So again, go to I encourage you, if you're listening on audio, please subscribe, give us some thumbs up on some of these videos at the Commercial Real Estate Talk channel. I have a short on DOGE here, terminating leases, and I also have a teaching tool, how to use this GSA search engine. I walk you through the whole process, 60 seconds, what can you say? And but that's a valuable tool that we'll be paying attention to. So thank you for tuning into this podcast. Remember, Proverbs 20:18, plans are established by counsel. By wise counsel, wage war. Until we talk again, stay strong. God bless. Good day.